Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. Mr. Croaky's nearly gone. Not quite, but nearly. Good enough not to worry about anyway, that's the main thing. Still a bit croaky, but getting there. Today, watering. I've just done the shady cooler stuff. And I've got the mounts to do today. I've got no new blooms. There's nothing new opened that you haven't seen before, so I'm not doing anything along those lines. But the proper resting Dendrobiums haven't actually been looked at either by you or by me for some time now. So as I'm getting all the mounts down to water them, it clears the decks to be able to get at those. And as it's a flush run today, I'll have clean water around. So I think I'll have a look at the resting Dendrobiums. And I'll say again, there's a difference. When you look up the Dendrobiums, you'll often find information about them that says drier in winter. That's not a resting type Dendrobium. There is a difference. Dry in winter, you know, withhold water, that's the resting types. And even some of those do actually get a little bit of water now and again. You know, and even in northern Thailand, where you would say you got a dry winter, after the monsoons finish, the winter starts, the rains stop, but they still get a couple of inches of rain during that period. That isn't no rain, it's a little bit. Nowhere near as much as the 2 or 3 meters they get in the summer, but they still get a bit of rain, so withholding water totally is not the best of ideas. And quite honestly, if you're not sure, then the easiest thing is to err on the side of caution. You know, drop that feed down as you get towards autumn and as you get into autumn, and once you're into winter proper, end of November, beginning of December, there shouldn't be any need for any feed because they won't be growing. And if your plant is still growing, then it will need feeding and watering, irrespective of what it says in the books. Excuse me. However, a lot of them will have finished their growths. The canes will be nice and big and fat because you've fed and watered well in the summer months. They go into their resting period or drier in winter period. And as I said, if you're not sure, then just keep your eye on the plant. And if those canes look like they're sucking in, you know, starting to desiccate, shrivel, shrink, whatever you want to call it, then they've got too little water, because although they may do that slightly, they shouldn't do it dramatically. So that's the best judge, really. And obviously some of them are annually deciduous, so once you get into that cold winter, providing you can provide that drop in temperature, a lot of them are going to dump their leaves on your floor, which can be quite disconcerting if you're not expecting it, but it's all good fun. Okay, so I'll crack on with the actual watering, and then once I've cleared those ones that are in the way out of the way and I can actually get at the resting types, we'll get those out and have a... It's basically a bud hunt. That's what I'm really looking for at this time of year. You know, we're well up from about 9¼ hours day length now, and by the end of the month we're only 10 minutes or so off of the magic 11 hours. So first week in March you get to that 11 hours, where if the plants haven't already responded to the increase in day length, that's when they will. That's when you'll start seeing things coming back into growth. And hopefully on your Dendrobiums of the types that produce their growths in the spring, that's the time to look out for those new growths and associated new roots. And blooms if it's big enough, you know, obviously if it's blooming size, otherwise there won't be any. Need another year or two or whatever. But yeah, that's the time to start thinking about coming back into growth, start to introduce water a bit more frequently, and then perhaps every second or third water, nice low level feed just to sort of kick them off and actually give them a spurt. And then as soon as those new growths start pushing on, you get in there, water and feed well. And as those new roots are coming out, if you need to, that's your repot time, yeah, after the roots have started. Unless you're absolutely confident with your plant because you've had it many years, that you know the size of the new growths and where the roots start growing, and you can plan a little bit ahead and perhaps repot a little bit earlier than that. But I would personally just wait for those new roots to start growing, and that way if you do lose some of the older roots, it's nowhere near so much of a big deal because the new roots are coming on to support the plant. So it's not a timing thing, it's an observational thing really. Right, let's get on with the watering then. I'm just filming this one as an example of a plant being wrong. It's out of season. Now this is Kuniko that had those lovely purple cluster of blooms on a while back, and it's a cross with Victoria Regina in it. I think the other bit is Goldschmidtianum or something, but both of those would be drier in winter naturally. When I got it, it started to grow. It's still growing. How silly would it be to stall all of these lovely new canes? That probably means I've lost the blooms, but what a plant I'll have. So this one's getting watered and fed all through the winter. The books say no, the write-ups say no. Roger says yes. Look at the plant, it's actively growing. I mean, this had the blooms down, oh blow me. I was just going to say, this had the blooms down here. There's two sets of buds coming out on that cane, and that is actually the cane that had the blooms on before. So we got some more buds to come. So I haven't lost the blooms, but that's the old part of the plant. The old part of the plant is okay. It's doing what it's supposed to do. It's dropped its leaves. Those are the deciduous canes. Those are the ones that bloom, and it looks like it's going to do it again. But the other part of the plant is out of season. It's actively growing. So I'm going to get those canes and as large and as bushy as I can, despite it being winter. It probably means that it's going to put up its next set of new growths later in the year than it should do. So this could take 2 years to get back into step, but nonetheless I'm following the plant. The plant tells me it wants to grow, so it'll get all the help it can. So that's not a true resting type, but it's a drier in winter primary cross, yeah. And with Victoria Regina in there, it's also a cool grower. Yeah. But yeah, so we should get some blooms on that soon. That's a surprise. Let's go and update me notes. Every time I turn round, I get this splash of greeny white in the corner of my eye, low down on the floor. So as Joey would say, how you doing? Well, apart from the colour, because I thought this was supposed to be orange, but maybe it will be, but that's a hell of a spike pushing up there. And new leaves. There's 3 new leaves here. And that spike. So, well, progress. I suppose I'd better start thinking about giving it some water and some feed if it's going to produce those blooms. Yeah, because I've just been ignoring this. It has had a dribble of water every now and again, but very little. And I think we've definitely got a new growth on the Cymbidium, not a spike. So only 1 spike this year, and 2 last year. Nonetheless, that new growth is starting a lot earlier than this new growth, the one that's blooming at the moment, or about to bloom, so that's good. But at the moment only 1, maybe it'll produce another new growth later, have to wait and see. It's probably coming up for a repot, that one, but it's certainly not outgrown its pot. The only reason to repot that would be broken down media, which quite honestly it isn't, so you can stay another year I think. Yeah, I'm quite pleased with that. Looking forward to what the hell that looks like, because I haven't got a clue. A clivia, before everybody starts telling me. I remembered this time. Right, so this is the first one, Dendrobium loddigesii, or gesii, however you want to say it. Mouth won't work. The difficulty with dendrobiums like this is when they've bloomed. If they've never bloomed, you haven't got the problem, but when they have, you end up with canes that look like this, and you've got the old remnants of where the flower spikes were, and they're very easy to confuse with new ones unless you've got a good memory and you know which canes they were on. But yes, this cane bloomed, I know this one did, and this one did, but I think from memory that's about as many as did last time round, and that was its first blooming as well. So the canes I'm looking at are the, quite honestly, the more greeny ones. They're last year's growth. And if I put my finger behind that cane, you can see there's a nubbin on the leaf joints. So that this one is just starting. Yeah. So it looks like we're going to get blooms here, 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 definitely. Definitely there. Probably there. I'm not sure my voice is going to hold out for this. But we've got nubbins. We haven't got buds showing yet. Now that one's just had a trickle of water. The canes are starting to shrivel in a little. It's mainly the older ones. The newer ones don't look too bad. They're still quite plump. But nonetheless, this hasn't had any water for a while. And this one, when we get a sunny day, sits in full sun through the glass, which would have a drying effect. Yeah, so that's had a trickle of water this time round. Well, put it to one side, see what happens next time it comes down. But it's definitely got nubbins on quite a few of the canes, which gives me the impression it could be quite a good blooming this time round. Good stuff. Dendrobium jenkinsii also had a dribble of water in appropriate places. Not a soaking, just a dribble where I can see roots, like in that bit there. No sign of any spikes on this. Obviously you can't look for nubbins on this type of plant. The spikes just push out, and once they start they're quite quick, so they sort of appear from nowhere. No sign of any yet, but quite honestly it's a bit early for this one to be thinking about blooming yet. This is more of a spring bloomer than a late winter bloomer, so I wouldn't actually be expecting to see spikes yet. But hopefully we're going to get some, but not yet. Don't see any signs yet. Still dropping the odd leaf here and there, and still is going to have a sort out after it's bloomed. Recreate a nice looking plant, because it's, as you can see, it's heading up the back of the mount. And although some people seem to think that might be a good idea, you have to think about when it blooms, which side are we going to look at? Half the blooms are going to be wasted, aren't they? So I need to get this remounted on a flat surface somehow. But not yet, that's later down the line. Probably be about May before I get round to doing that. But no signs of buds yet. Hopefully soon. Now, Dendrobium findlayanum has got some buds starting. Noticed them the other day. Tends to bloom near the end, but sometimes buds can form a bit farther back. They tend to be a bit staggered. The first buds are always towards the end of the cane, like here. Yeah, and then some others often push out a little bit later. But yeah, we've got some buds on this one, so this one's coming on. That's had a little trickle of water, but quite honestly these canes are not desiccating, not to any extent. You know, they've still got a smooth surface in the main, so this is not in need of water, it's just had a little bit. And this is one of those where you do have to go careful, because if you start bringing this one back to life a little bit too early, you will get kikis instead of blooms. It's one of those that, unless, I mean, once they're formed, and obviously the cell structure consists of the potential for a bud, it's not going to turn into a kiki. But if it hasn't yet formed that, it can change its mind and produce kikis instead. But once the buds are formed, they can't magically transform into a kiki. It's going to be one or the other, and the decision is made earlier than before you see them, really. So once you can see your buds coming, you've got buds, you know. But if I tried to bring this back to life a little too early, then some of these other points back here could produce kikis. I mean, I've got a jar full of kikis over there, which you've seen, so it obviously can produce kikis, and does. So this one's got to be kept on hold, and it's just had the tiniest amount of water just on these bare roots. Yeah, that's all it's had. Just literally to stop any desiccation going on. But we've got a few buds coming on what are last year's growths, in fact, which is where they should be. Kept its leaves. It hasn't dumped many. These are the early canes. This was what I got when I bought it, and they dropped their leaves several years ago, and the previous year's growths in the main have dropped their leaves now, so it's getting into a nice pattern. Big strong canes through the growing season, feed and water well, and then ease off, dry through the winter, little trickle every now and again just to stop it shriveling up. If you take all the energy out of the canes and they start to desiccate, they're probably less likely to bloom because the strength's going out of them. So you know, there's a balance there somewhere, and the leaves on these canes will probably drop during next year. I can't remember whether they drop during the year or towards the end of their second year, if you see what I mean. But we'll find out. But a few buds on that one anyway. Not many yet, but we'll see how it goes. Starting to get to the much bigger stuff now, so I'm having to stand back a bit. This is Dendrobium, whoops, trip over, why don't you? Friedrichsianum. Massive growth last year, well impressed with its growth. And I've just had a quick look on this one. This bloomed last year, middle of May until the middle of July. So stop and think. Is it the winter rest that triggers the blooms on this plant? And the simple answer is obviously no. It's got nothing to do with the winter rest. Because if it was, we'd be looking at some spikes starting to form in the near future. You know, probably during next month, or towards the end of this month. It's almost a summer bloomer, and if it's a summer bloomer, the rest has nothing to do with triggering the blooms. It's more likely to be the dramatic increase in day length and light levels for this one. So although I'm going to have a look, I don't expect to see any signs of buds on this unless it bloomed at an abnormal time last time round, which I doubt very much. No, it's not a sign of a bud on that one, as expected. All the canes have finished growing. That one is probably the last one to finish. That is its last leaf now. All the others are finished, terminal leaf. Some have trouble identifying a terminal leaf. To me it's obvious, but then I've been growing these quite a long time. It just has a look about it. It often is at a different angle. If you look at the angle of the leaves coming out of the cane there, and then that one sticks up, that's its terminal leaf. The same will happen on here, even though this terminal leaf's only just formed. This one will follow round with these, and that one will stay where it is, sticking up a bit. And as you can see here, this one has only just formed this leaf. It hasn't even opened properly yet. So still an element of growing going on here, but not a lot. It's just that one cane. So, well, and this one actually, that is its terminal leaf, but it's only just opened. Yeah. So yeah. So this is a late spring bloomer. So does it need a full winter rest? And the answer is probably no. But nonetheless, drier in winter is still a form of rest. So that's what it's getting. It's going to get some water now. It's crispy dry. So it will get a trickle of water. Just stop any desiccation, not that there is any. That one's slightly desiccated, but not a lot. These are the older growths. These are the previous year's growths. So I'd expect those to look a little like what the deciduous ones will look like eventually. Yeah, so slight bit of desiccation on this, but not enough to worry about, and not on all of the canes. But nonetheless, it's going to get a bit of water. But I suspect that that one could probably do without the full rest, and it would still bloom. But that's what it got last year, and it bloomed, so that's what it's going to get this year. And it certainly didn't do any harm to its growth. Yeah? You know, keeping it dry through the winter last year didn't affect that season's growth, because that season's growth's the best it's ever been. So it made up for it. Yeah, so we'll see how that one does anyway, but no sign of buds on that one yet. I'm going to start, the rest of these are long cane dendrobiums, so I'm going to start hanging them. It might mean they're a little silhouetted, but I can deal with that on the computer. This is Dendrobium aphyllum. This was the only new growth last year that's worth talking about. The other little one up here didn't do much. We've got buds starting here. Up to about there, I think. Somewhere about there. So we're going to have buds, blooms on this one over virtually the whole length of last year's growth, which is good. I mean, this was just a single kiki when I got it off Alberto, and it bloomed, so I was pleased. But it looks like it's settled down into a nice pattern now, pushed up a good new growth, which is now going to bloom. And then hopefully this season, when it gets going, it'll try and push out perhaps a few more canes rather than just one. But we'll see how it goes. But we got buds forming on this quite well at the moment, so they're coming on nicely. And no, they're not going to magically turn into kikis because I've watered it. They're buds. This one's Dendrobium primulinum. It's actually quite a close relative to aphyllum. Very similar blooms as well. This bloomed at the end of March last year. Well, being that it's the beginning of February, it ought to be showing some signs. So it's just a matter of which of the canes that haven't bloomed yet. This is one. All I can see is some swellings at the moment, not actual buds. And then this is the other long cane that it grew last season. And again, just swellings. And they haven't actually pushed through yet, but they're there in their embryo form. So in theory, this business of is it a kiki or is it a bud sort of thing, these could be in their embryo form. They could have the possibility to decide to grow kiki cells and structures rather than buds. So although this one's just had a little bit of water, it was a very little bit just on the bare roots. This one I've got to watch. There's no actual buds yet, but yeah, I'm looking for blooms end of March, beginning of April, so we should see some buds on that soon. Well, if it's going to. See no reason why it shouldn't. Did it last year all right. See how we go with that one then. Right, this one is Dendrobium nesta, which is an anosmum cross. The previous year it grew 3 canes, which all bloomed. Last year it only grew 2, but they were bigger and stronger and fatter, so they were better canes. And we've got buds on this starting where we've got a nubbin here, and then buds coming out right down the cane as far as there. So that's one of last year's growths, and the other one is round here. And that again has got buds forming quite high up the cane, right down towards, well, right to the very end of the cane. So both of last year's growths are going to bloom, that's good. And the buds are forming, they're breaking through the sheaths, so they're buds. And yeah, this one's getting more older canes than new ones at the moment. That doesn't mean I'm going to take them off, but in theory, and this is a theory, on a cane that's already bloomed, let's take this one. So this one bloomed from down here to there. So it didn't bloom over the full length of the cane. In theory, it could push out a couple of blooms on the rim. See, there is a nubbin there. It is possible. Some say that doesn't happen on these type of dendrobiums. Once a cane's bloomed, whatever blooms you got, that's all you're ever going to get. It won't bloom again. But I'm pretty sure some of them do, actually. So I'm keeping my eye out on the previous year's growths near the base of the cane, because they obviously bloomed down the, you know, the last part of the cane. But it is possible. There could be an odd bud in places. And this one may well prove that point, one way or the other. See here, this is a previous year's growth in my hand. If we follow this one up, I don't know. It's difficult to say. The best thing I can say is let's wait and see. And if there is any blooms at all on the previous year's growth, then it can do it. That's all I'll say. And if there aren't, then the chances are the people who say once cane's bloomed on this type, it will never bloom again, are probably right. I'm not going to say one way or the other, definitely, until I've got an example. But we should get some good blooms on that. They're starting, so they're on their way. And the last one to look at is actually Dendrobium anosmum, the species. Its only new growth last year, worth talking about, is over 1 metre long. So longer than anything it's had before, which is good. But what we need this year is more than one cane. But you can see this one's got nubbins as far back as here, definitely. Probably there as well. So from here, we're going to be blooming down as far as, well, possibly right down to here. There's bulges forming even on the leaved portion, but the buds, again, they're just breaking their sheaths. This blooms on a par with Nesta, the one we looked at before. They bloom roughly around the same time, so they may well even be both out together. I'd rather they were staggered because the blooms don't last long. So if one blooms after the other, doesn't matter which way round, then it extends the life in here of those type of blooms. They're both a gorgeous colour and both highly fragrant. I would find it a little bit of a waste if they bloomed together, because I'd probably only get 3 weeks worth of that until the following year. But anyway, we've got one good growth and it's going to bloom. So yeah, and hopefully this year, having established a very good root system last year, hopefully this year it's going to manage to push out several new growths and not just one. But that's a way down the line yet. I doubt if that will produce any new growths until it gets to bloom or around the same time. So it's a bit of a wait and see. There's a large portion of old plant on here. You can see the stumps where the canes were cut off. Those canes were on it where I got it, when I got it, along with those 3 darker coloured ones at the back. So that's the plant I bought, the back end, if you see what I mean. And since then we've grown a few new canes. So yeah, last year's bloomed and this year's looks like it's going to bloom as well. So that's the resting Dendrobiums. You might sort of think, oh, why didn't he show so and so? Well, there are some that I call semi-resting. Yeah, so they're getting watered a little more frequently than the true resters. That's the list of those that I treat as being full resting type Dendrobiums, and those are they. And we'll have another look at them in a few weeks' time and see what's happening. Yeah, that'll do for today. My voice is getting sore now. I was hoping to get away with it, but at least it's better today than it has been. So we have some progress. And I'll see you next time. Thanks for dropping by.